Everyone is completely wrong about Phara post-rework.
Isolated up here. I can go for it by myself now.
What the f happened to my HP? Fictional character.
You got your one.
I got my one.
Yep.
Guys, I'm gonna fucking...
I didn't jump into you, did I?
Their
I
Phara's...
got booped. I got booped.
Dude, the Phara's won! Me, man.
Oh, I tried to hide in the bot.
I don't think they're big fans of me diving them.
5 seconds.
Dude, I got one shot.
Be through. Be through. Be through.
I keep seeing tier list after tier list putting Phara as one of the worst characters in the game right now, and that's just not the case. Many are ranking her way low because they're playing her fundamentally wrong. For one, Phara is no longer a skybox flyer. She's a dynamic diver with good spam potential. But there's a lot we gotta break down if you want to master this underrated character and snag some free wins. So we're gonna break it all down, but my private 2-hour Patreon coaching is finally opened up. Only 10 slots available, so if you want to get some extra help with Season 9, check it out right now down below, and let's get into it. First off, let's talk about how a lot of the new changes affect Phara and many of the misconceptions that people still have about Phara that is causing them to think she is much worse than she really is. People say she dies too easy due to big bullet hitboxes. People say that she just feels clunky. A lot of this is coming from people that have grinded Phara before and they're trying to play new Phara like old Phara and it's not working. The first thing that you need to understand is that you cannot float non-stop. You cannot get your fuel back unless you're on the ground, and that just means that you walk a lot on Phara. Phara walks a lot to get her fuel back, and there's a lot of the time where you're going to be playing corners cover with your team. You are not constantly playing the skybox. In fact, I would say there's very specific moments where you want to take flight at all, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. On top of that, so many people want to play Mercy with Phara, and that just doesn't really work anymore. It is incredibly hard for a Mercy to stick with the Phara and play with the Phara in the same way that it would be hard for a Mercy to pocket a Genji that is going in. Phara can play like that, but it's not utilizing her kit to the full potential, so you don't even really want a Mercy pocket. You would rather have characters like Zen and Ana, but I'll talk about what characters are good versus her and what characters she's good with later in the video. Another misconception that you'll see is that hit scans counter Phara because that's how it always used to be, but I'm going to tell you right now, hit scans straight up are not Phara counters. The only frustrating hit scan to deal with is specifically Widow on long distance maps. If you have rooftops or cover that you can play around on a lot of Koth maps, it doesn't matter, and a lot of maps you can play around the Phara, get into position to dive her, and if you get close to her, you can just body her just like any other diver bodies Widow from close range. And unless the other hit scans have a designated pocket, Phara is perfectly fine against them. In fact, oftentimes you love to be against them on Phara. Seems strange? That's because you need to forget everything you know about Phara. Basically, I'm pointing out all these misconceptions because most of the reasons people think Phara is weak is because they still relate her to old Phara, her old playstyles, her old counters. So in order for us to proceed, you need to first forget everything you know about Phara. Now, one of the reasons that Phara is so dominant and has such high potential is because of her mobility. Phara has the most mobility out of any DPS in the roster, and I would argue the most dynamic mobility out of almost anyone in the game with the exception of maybe like Doomfist and Wrecking Ball. This is because Phara can change herself multiple directions at any one time. She can concussion herself in one direction, instantly jet dash in the opposite direction, and then she can jump jet vertical, and by then she'll get another jet dash. She can change directions a lot. It's similar to how Tracer can change her direction a lot on the ground, but Phara has that additional vertical element that really sets her apart, and there's ways to completely abuse it with new Phara. Now, specifically with hover jets, they are not going to recharge until you touch the ground, so you cannot perma float. And like I said, the majority of the time, you're actually going to want to walk, and you want to make sure that you have high amounts of fuel, because when you use your jump jet, you're going to get 50% over fuel that is going to allow you to use it to kind of float. You can peek little corners or high ground positions, and you also get a little bit faster when you're floating as well, so you can just float like 1 foot above the ground and use that if you're trying to move really quickly or move around. Now, on top of that, jets give you much more horizontal mobility than before, so you can use it to maneuver around angles, peek enemies from various angles. Like, you could fly up the side of a building and peek it multiple times on the way down, just slightly peeking to the left of the building as you're spamming a certain location. And if you ever go a little bit too far out, or you want to take a wide angle, you can, and then you just jet dash back to cover. Now, in addition to that, realize that your primary fire isn't going to do as much damage to you as it did before, so don't be afraid to start off every high fly engagement with a rocket jump first. Now, I also want to make sure that you understand that you are not a skybox character. You are not someone that can fly around in open space. Phara needs to use cover like any other character. In a lot of ways, you are Tracer in the middle of the air. You're a really big hitbox. Yes, you are a little bit more beefy, but you will die if you are not crossing through open space deliberately against most characters in the game. So stop floating super high and thinking that you're not going to die, because you're just going to get killed super easily. Now, her new ability, Jet Dash, is the one that allows Phara to play like a diver or a dueler even. You can use it to run to cover, like the peek and dip. You can use it to dodge abilities in the middle of a fight, and you can use it to fight enemies. Combined with your concussion on yourself that is going to move you inward, you can change directions 2 times while in air. You can go at somebody, concussion one direction, and then quickly Jet Dash another direction. And if you're ever above someone and you change directions multiple times while dealing damage to them, they're just completely lost. It doesn't matter how good they are mechanically, you're just going to completely destroy them. Now, concussion is a bit harder to use than Jet Dash, as you need to be close to the ground or a wall in order to use it. So Jet Dash is the one that you usually want to have when you're making a play, because it gives you the most amount of flexibility, and also you're going to need it if you ever do a high dive where you're using your jump jets to go upwards and you're using your Jet Dash to go forward, and then you're falling down silently, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. Now, we do need to talk about the duality of Phara. We've talked about before about the duality of a character like Genji, where there's a time when you're going in and there's a time when you're poking. Well, Phara's spam, luckily, is crazy strong. With that large explosive radius, you can get consistent damage on enemies, constantly triggering the DPS passive. And oftentimes, when you can't go in, when they have a good setup, when they have angles, when they have characters that can basically discord you or kind of keep you in check, you are just going to want to play the ground, play with your team, or play corners and cover, and just spam hotspots. Spam areas that enemies are in. Spam corners. Spam especially supports that don't move. Characters like Ana are just easy prey for Phara, because you can force them to move, and oftentimes they won't even see the rocket coming in time. They're going to take some of that damage, and then they're going to have to reposition. You get to spam, and you get to stay in this neutral game while you're constantly doing tons of damage, and you're constantly triggering that DPS passive. In addition to that, you're trying to gather a little bit of information as well, because you can shoot your rocket around the corner. If it gets hit markers, you know someone's there, and typically it's going to be a DPS that is off-angling, and that could be something that could indicate you to go in, depending on what DPS they are. Now, in this poke phase, concussion is your best friend, because you can boot people off the high ground, you can boot people out of cover. There's a lot of ways to force people out of position in the neutral game, and then just get a free kill. There's so many situations where you're just poking as Phara, you're getting a lot of ult charge, you're doing a lot of damage, and then you just create a kill for your team out of magic just by conking someone into your team. The concussion is more powerful now than it was before. It boops people further, and it does 30 damage, which we'll talk about some of the combos with Phara in a little bit, but this really enables you to just have free potential kills in the neutral, which is super strong. Now, if there is a window for you to go in, you can pivot on a dime with Phara. You can go from all of the sudden just poking and being pretty passive, more or less. You can conk, jet dash, and hover jets in, and you're just like crossing the whole map so freaking quickly and just get onto a character just out of nowhere. So if there's ever a moment where you've gotten some amount of advantage, or you killed the only character that can really threaten you, you can really pivot with your team, just going from that poke to that dive crazy quickly, like a character like Genji would. Now, we do need to talk about the combos, because this is something that a lot of people are messing up with Phara, new Phara. They don't understand the new combos, especially now that everyone has more health. Some of your old combos don't work, and there's new combos because now concussion does damage. So, as an example, you can't one-shot Tracer anymore with a body shot direct into a melee. That's not going to work anymore. It's not going to do enough damage. She's just going to recall, and honestly, Tracer isn't the easiest matchup for you, so you would really like to be able to one-shot her. Now, there is a new one-shot to Tracer, and honestly, a lot of other characters that are pretty low, and it's the shot plus the concussion. This is going to be able to one-shot characters like Tracer in a way that getting that shot plus melee does not, and it's also just a nice burst of damage because your concussion moves faster than your primary fire. So if someone is rather weak, you can shoot at them and concussion them and do a giant amount of damage, and you get a crazy amount of kills with just concussion with new Phara, to be honest. And even if it doesn't kill them, you're booping them out of position, or you're putting them in an awkward position where you can line up another shot or some secondary spam. Now, if you're ever in a situation where someone is either stunned or sleeping or something along those lines, a shot plus a concuss, all direct, will kill every single squishy besides Torb and Bastion. This is mainly because they have armor, so yeah, just keep that in mind. The concussion is also something that boops incredibly far compared to how it does before. You can boop a crazy amount of people off the map. Like in this one game on Koth, on this one map, I booped 3 different people off, including a tank, DPS, and support. And it's especially being able to either boop people off and just get free kills, boop people out of position and ping and comment to get a potential kill, or use boop to just kill someone straight out with its damage. Plus, you could use it for mobility. Like, the concuss is such a dynamic ability that it's hard sometimes deciding what to do with it because you want it for everything. There's just so many good options, and it's one of Phara's most powerful abilities. Now, the reason that you want to play Phara, and the reason that Phara is so good, is that Phara can dominate hit scans and duel them and other characters quite easily. Keep in mind, if I'm up against a soldier or a cast, I'm not going to be flying super high in their line of sight. I'm just going to die, and I'm eventually going to have to go down to the ground anyways. But the most important thing is you want to take a fight on your terms. So if you're ever in a situation where you're poking or just playing your neutral and one of these hit scans address you or force a challenge to you, you can either deny the duel by booping them away and then backing up yourself, or you can just, dash away or concuss away. Just, you want to make sure that every fight starts on your terms, not on their terms, and you have the advantage. Now, something that's really true regardless of skill across the board is people have a very hard time aiming above them. The more vertical you are, the better your chances are. Like, if you're directly above someone where they have to literally look straight up to hit you, this is someone that no one practices. This is someone that no aim trainers practice or train you up on, and it's very, very difficult. If a Phara is above you and fighting you, and even more so if they're changing directions multiple times while on top of you, booping you around and doing a lot of damage to you, that's just so hard. It's so hard to deal with. And when you're at that range, you're going to hit all your shots on Phara the vast majority of the time. So it doesn't matter how good this person aims. They have a micro window to do anything, and it's just incredibly, incredibly difficult to do, to the point where if you engage properly, even the best hit scan players in the game will still struggle to do anything about you. So like one example is, let's say I'm playing against a cast on Phara. I'm going to play my neutral, I'm going to poke, I'm going to do a lot of damage, and I can jiggle around little corners and poke this cast over and over again, doing splash damage. I'm doing more damage to him than he's doing to me because I'm playing corners and cover. And if I ever get a situation where I conk him out of position a little bit too far, or I set up in a certain place where I can get on top of him, then all of a sudden it's just over for him. It's like an I win condition where my neutral is better than him, and then if I can set up the right situations, I can just either get him out of position, our team kills him, or I can just dive on myself and kill him. So basically, how hit scans were the characters that countered Phara in the past, that's not really the case anymore. In a lot of ways, she is countered in the same way that like a Tracer would be countered by hit scan. Yeah, you don't want to play in their line of sight. Yeah, you don't want to just be poking them from ranges that you're not good in. But if you set up the right engagements, you're going to beat them, and they're not even a counter. So it's more of a skill issue. That's the best way to put it. There are characters that are really hard to deal with on Phara. She's not uncounterable by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not the characters you would think. You would think it's like Cassidy, Ashe, Soldier, but it's not really those characters. I would say the hardest counter in the DPS role is undoubtedly Ekko, and that's for several reasons. Number one, Ekko can chase you wherever you're going, and she's not going to miss on you because she can beam you. So she can basically chase you and punish you when you get to cut line of sight from a lot of these hit scans when you're poking from far away or from, along a building high up. You could just like stop peeking. And Ekko can chase you and she can just beam you down. And a really frustrating part about dealing with Ekko is you can direct her twice and she lives, which is something that I've done multiple times. And Ekko's chasing me and I direct her, and then I freaking die. On top of that, it's really hard to do consistent damage to the Ekko because she's never going to fight you on your terms. She's just going to wait for you to be in a situation where you're disadvantaged. She's going to go for you. So yeah, it's just a really hard matchup, and it's one of the worst matchups for Far in particular. Another matchup that can be kind of difficult is a Tracer plus Zen matchup, because Tracer can technically mark you. You do have to come back down to the ground where you're vulnerable, and characters that can chase you around corners are far scarier than hit scans that you can just deny line of sight. So characters like Tracer with the Zen pocket, characters like Wrecking Ball can be a bit annoying as well. But undoubtedly, the character that you don't want to see the most is D.Va. D.Va, especially a well-played D.Va, can prevent you from making plays. You can play really passive, you can still spam well, you can still get a lot of value that way, but you can actually completely dominate lobbies on Phara. Like, take them over completely, where you're like 20 kills and no deaths, and you're just rolling, and then when the enemy picks D.Va, all of a sudden, all your aggressive plays aren't going to work nearly as much anymore, and if you go for a super aggressive play, you don't have some way to magically get out if you use all these cooldowns to get in, so it's just going to end up in you not getting any kills. So you have to play really passive, and I'm not saying that that can't work, but you're not going to be able to carry as hard. So D.Va doesn't necessarily kill you or deal with you completely, but she stops your max play potential, your max carry potential, especially if you are the one that is like carrying the game. You can't do that anymore if the D.Va is very, very good and she shuts you down. But that's not different from any other characters. It's important to know your bad matchups on Phara, and these are undoubtedly your bad matchups. But what characters combo best with Phara? What characters make Phara completely nuts and busted and capable of doing magical things? Well, first off, on the tanks, it's Winston and Wrecking Ball. Winston creates a ton of space, and space means Phara gets to fly in and kill things really, really easily. Wrecking Ball, it's amazing to spam everything Wrecking Ball slams. In fact, Wrecking Ball seems to be pretty good this season, surprisingly, and especially when Wrecking Ball's booping people, Phara's booping people, and you just have someone that can focus targets that you get low. You have someone that can boot people out, and then you boot people out again, or, you know, just something to spam into. These are the best tanks to play with Phara, but other dive tanks are fine. I think D.Va's pretty fine. I think Doomfist is fine. It's just dive is the best for Phara. In addition to that, dive DPS are really, really good, or DPS that can keep the characters that keep you in check down. So if there's a Sombra to put pressure on that D.Va, or if there's a soldier to keep the enemy Ekko in check, characters like that, if these characters are kept in check, then you're more freed up to do what you want to do. But as far as the best supports to play with Phara, undoubtedly, it's Zen and Ana. Typically, these characters are the best. Ana can heal you very easily, and Nano is super, super strong with you. Zen is just a powerhouse right now, and being able to put Discord and spam onto someone and just give you an orb from time to time, this is fine. Now, I will say that because of the self-healing passive, Phara can operate on really weird support comps in a way that you wouldn't think she would be able to. You play the ground a lot, you play corners a lot, and there's a clear distinction between the times that you're going in and not going in. So I've won a ton of games with like BAP Lucio. I'm getting like no heals. It doesn't matter. Like, you can play Phara with really weird support comps just fine. Almost the worst thing that you don't want to see is when someone locks Mercy and you have like a weird secondary support and your tank isn't getting any resources and the Mercy is giving it all to you and you don't even really want the Mercy pocket, because then you can't play your aggressive divey play style. Now, I will say that a Phara that gets to go in super, super aggressively is going to mop up everybody. So using Beat aggressively or using Nano aggressively on the Phara is just going to be team wipe after team wipe. You get them like crazy, and I would say that nanoing a Phara and letting that Phara go in is, in my opinion, like better than Nano Blade. I know that that seems weird, but unless they have DM or something to stop you, you just get to two-tap everybody, kill everybody, concussion kill. And yeah, I mean, you just get to clear the whole lobby very, very quickly. And yeah, it's a very, very powerful combo. Now, it can't all be amazing on Phara, and one of her weakest aspects is Barrage. Barrage is terrible. It might be the weakest DPS ult in the game. It's like so freaking bad. The only way that you're ever going to kill anybody is if you're point blank to them. And this is squishies too. And a lot of squishies will literally shrug off your ult. I've ulted Bastions, I've ulted Torbs, and they're just like, eh. And a lot of tanks, like I said, you have to literally be right on top of them to kill them. And the problem with Barrage is you can get that kill, but you can't cancel the Barrage. So you're gonna die almost always after the Barrage, and that's just terrible. It's not doing enough damage for you to burst people fast enough, and it's not allowing you to cancel it and move, so you're basically at maximum getting one. And I would say the best way to use Barrage is like trade for a tank. Like, literally conk their tank out a little bit and then, you know, try to Barrage. And if you can, you got to combo Barrage with someone else, but Really, Barrage is a very, very bad ultimate, and it's very inconsistent. Just take what you can get with it and realize that it's not like a great win condition, to be honest with you. The next up, we do need to talk about Phara's meta strength. And as a whole, I think that in ranked, she can roll all the way to the highest ranks. Like right now, I'm doing well with her going up against former top 500 hit scan players and doing just fine. And I honestly feel like every single session I play Phara, I get a little bit better, I learn something new, and it's definitely a character that I plan to continue to grind for the rest of the season. She's just so freaking fun. Don't take my word for it and lock her in your games. Now, one of the things, though, is that she does need space to succeed on maps without covering corners. So on maps like Ilios Well and a lot of these other maps that do have high ground corners, things like that, she's the entire package. She's super strong. It doesn't really matter what your team plays. It doesn't really matter what the enemy plays. You can just body on those maps. You get to play corners cover, high ground, boot people off the map, boot people out of position. You can just kind of do it all. But on some maps that are really wide open and there's a lot of gaps between each pieces of cover, you need something to create you space. And that could be a Winston jumping in or a ball jumping in or something. But if you just have like a Sigma or like, you know, a tank that is kind of standing back and just poking from distance, you're never really going to create enough space to do something, and you kind of just have to rely on your conk to get someone out of position, or you have to be really, really patient and wait for someone to be out of position slightly, like a soldier taking too wide of an off angle, and you just get to jump on him and kill him, and then the fight is opened up. The last up, I want to go over some mistakes and some tips that are super important and will let you level up on the character almost instantly. So first off, let's talk about jump jets. It's a super long cooldown just flying up. And oftentimes you don't want to use it right away because you're not going to get it back in time. You want to make sure that you're using it pretty sparingly. And most of the time, I would say you want to save it until you need it, or until you, after you secure the kill, you can fly away. Like after you killed the hit scan, you can use jump jets to fly away, get height. Now they don't have a hit scan, so they can't punish you, and then you can kind of reset and get away. Now, one of the things that you can also do with jump jets is if you're indoors, you can use it to increase horizontal distance. So if you need to move really fast, you can kind of just use it. You bounce off the ceiling and you just go where you want to go. And if you're ever fighting another person indoors, you can combine jump jets with jet dash to make it almost impossible to shoot you. Like I can't tell you how many times I just walked into a room with an Ana, dashed up, dashed over, conked them over, and they're getting booped around. I'm like changing directions multiple times midair, and I'm shooting rockets at them because I know how they're gonna move and how I'm gonna move because I'm the one doing it, and they don't know anything. They just kind of trying to hit this crazy sleep dart on someone that is moving while they're moving. It's just like impossible. You can just body people like that, and it's super, super strong. Now, if you're dying a lot, it's probably because you're not playing cover, or you don't have at least a concussion or a jet dash always available. Unless you're going for a play that you know will work, or you're completely playing safe, make sure you have one ability or the other so you have a way to like get out if you're taking damage or something out of nowhere. Now, something that's really underrated to do on Far is just to shoot at tanks a lot if they're mid-range. It doesn't take a lot of your shots to force a lot of cooldowns. You know, you can force grasp, you can force a tank to just back up, and if you're from mid-range, just around a corner, you can jiggle, shoot at a tank, and you're not going to miss these shots. You're going to constantly trigger the passive, you're going to do a crazy amount of damage on these tanks, and it really adds up, and it's a way that you can whittle down the enemy team a lot out of nowhere. And once you whittle down their resources and then they're trying to build them back up, there's going to be a window in there for you to go and do something a little more aggressive. So that's something you can do in the neutral to get that advantage. Now, the last tip I'll give you is the sneaky tip on Phara. Phara can sneak around a lot, and she does it rather well. Oftentimes, you're trying to play the ground and get your fuel back anyways. You can crouch and sneak around. You just waddle to a closer position to your enemy, conk them close to you, fly on top of them with jet dash, and just kill them. And you can do that to a lot of hit scans. Another thing that you can do is if there's rooftops, you can just fly really high, put yourself above a hit scan, and then just fall down. And you're just falling down on top of them silently. You get right on top of them. You started off with a direct shot into a concuss, into a jet dash, into another shot, and you just kill them. You just kill them. And they have no freaking idea where the hell you came from. Now, in conclusion, forget everything you know about Phara. Phara's secretly busted if you master the character, and I freaking love Phara. This rework was amazing, and I'm super, super happy. But definitely let me know if you have any questions about how to play Phara in the comments down below, and make sure you check out my private coaching on my Patreon if you want some extra help. Thank you so much for coming by. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.